The encrypted files glowed on Commander Elena Vasquez's laptop screen like digital poison, each line of code a betrayal that cut deeper than any blade. Her fingers trembled as she scrolled through the communications, 3 years of secret transmissions. Between Captain Marcus Kane, her mentor, her lover, her commanding officer, and Colonel Viktor Petrov of Russian military intelligence. Operation Blackwater, Phase 3 complete. Asset deployment successful. Recommend acceleration of timeline. K confirmed. Your cooperation ensures mutual benefit. Next shipment coordinates attached. VP the timestamp showed yesterday, 0347 hours. While Elena had been sleeping beside him, trusting him with her life and her heart, Marcus had been selling classified submarine positions to the enemy. The very submarines her brother Miguel served on. The submarines that had mysteriously suffered equipment failures in contested waters over the past 6 months. Elena's secure phone buzzed. Marcus's name flashed on the screen. "Where are you?" His voice carried that familiar warmth that had once made her feel safe. Now it made her stomach turn. "You missed the morning briefing." She stared at the evidence scattered across her screen. Financial transfers, operational details, the names of assets compromised. Her own security clearance had been used to access files she'd never seen before. Marcus had been using her credentials, her trust, her love as weapons against her own country. "Elena, are you there?" "I'm here," she managed, her voice steady despite the chaos in her chest. "Just dealing with some technical issues. I'll be in soon." "Good. We need to discuss the new patrol assignments." "The Admiral wants everything finalized by 1400. More submarines to put at risk. More lives to gamble with Russian intelligence." Elena closed her eyes, feeling the weight of decision settle on her shoulders like lead armor. "I'll see you soon," she said, and ended the call. Through her apartment window, the Norfolk Naval Base spread out like a sleeping giant in the pre-dawn darkness. Somewhere in those buildings, Marcus was planning his next move, confident in his deception. He had no idea that Elena Torres, the woman he'd trained, promoted, and betrayed, was about to become his worst nightmare. Elena reached for her secure line to the FBI, but her finger hovered over the dial button as Marcus's words from last night echoed in her memory. "You're the only one I trust completely, Elena. In this job, that kind of trust is rarer than gold." She had believed him. God help her, even now, part of her wanted to believe there was some explanation, some reason that would make this all make sense. But the evidence didn't lie. 23 submarine positions compromised. $14 million in cryptocurrency payments. And Miguel's submarine had been in 3 of those exact locations. When their equipment failures occurred, Elena dialed the number. "Before we dive deeper into this incredible story, I want to take a moment to thank you for watching, creating, and narrating these detailed, novel-length stories. Takes tremendous time and research to bring you the most engaging content possible. We're embarking on a journey of nearly 50,000 words together. That's a full novella. If you're already hooked by what you've heard, please show your support by hitting that like button, sharing this story with someone who would enjoy it, and subscribing to the channel. Don't forget to ring the notification bell so you never miss our latest stories. This is going to be an epic adventure, so get comfortable. And let's continue with this remarkable tale. 6 hours earlier, Elena had been the perfect naval intelligence officer. Her record was flawless, top of her class at Annapolis, commendations from 3 different admirals, and a security clearance that opened doors most officers never even knew existed. At 29, she was the youngest commander in her division, with a reputation for thoroughness that bordered on obsession. She had also been completely in love with Captain Marcus Kane. "You're overthinking it again," Marcus had said, watching her pace their shared apartment's living room at 2 in the morning. "The intercepted communications don't necessarily indicate a security breach. Could be a training exercise we weren't briefed on. Elena had paused in her pacing, laptop balanced in one hand while she gestured with the other. 3 separate submarine communications going dark in international waters, all in areas where we've detected increased Russian naval activity. That's not a coincidence, Marcus. He'd smiled that patient smile she'd fallen for 3 years ago, when he'd been Lieutenant Commander Kane and she'd been fresh out of intelligence school. Even then, he'd had that way of making her feel simultaneously brilliant and naive. What would you have me do? Launch a full investigation based on your hunch? It's not a hunch, it's pattern recognition. Look, she'd turned the laptop toward him, showing the tactical display. September 15th, USS Hampton loses sonar contact for 4 hours. October 3rd, USS Virginia reports navigation system failures. October 20th, USS Texas surfaces unexpectedly due to electrical problems. All in the same general area, all after routine patrol assignments. Marcus had walked over, placing his hands on her shoulders with the familiarity of their 3-year relationship. His touch had been warm, reassuring, exactly what she'd needed after 16-hour days of chasing shadows in intelligence reports. Elena. Love, you're seeing patterns because you want to see them. It's what makes you good at your job. But sometimes equipment just fails. The Navy's been running these subs hard, and maintenance cycles are stretched thin. She'd wanted to believe him. Marcus had 15 years of experience to her 7. He'd served on submarines before transitioning to intelligence. He understood operational realities in ways she was still learning. And when he'd kissed her forehead and suggested they get some sleep, she'd let herself be convinced. But Elena had also been trained never to ignore her instincts completely. So while Marcus slept, she'd run one more search through the classified databases, cross-referencing the submarine incidents with intercepted enemy communications. That's when she'd found the encrypted partition on the shared drive. The partition that contained 3 years of carefully hidden treason. Now, as she waited for FBI Special Agent Chen to arrive at the diner 12 miles from the base, Elena replayed every moment of the past 3 years, searching for signs she'd missed. The overseas trips Marcus had taken for consulting work. The expensive watch he'd claimed was a gift from his uncle. The way he'd sometimes known things about operations before the TOSU official briefings. The way he'd always encouraged her to access higher-level files for research purposes. Commander Vasquez, an Asian woman with sharp eyes and a deliberately unremarkable appearance, slid into the booth across from her. Agent Chen, FBI Counterintelligence. Elena had made the call using protocols she'd memorized but hoped never to use. Within 2 hours, the Bureau had mobilized a response team. The speed suggested they'd been watching someone, possibly Marcus, possibly her. Thank you for coming. Elena slid a encrypted drive across the table. Everything's on there. Financial records, communication logs, operational details. 3 years of systematic intelligence leaks to Russian SVR. Agent Chen pocketed the drive without examining it. We'll need you to walk us through everything. But first, I need to ask you in immediate danger? I don't think so. He doesn't know I've discovered anything yet. Where is Captain Kane now? Base. Morning briefing in the Admiral's conference room. Planning more operations? Elena's jaw tightened. Planning which submarines to put at risk next. Agent Chen studied her carefully. Commander, I need you to understand what we're asking. If you help us build this case, you'll be testifying against your commanding officer, a man you've been romantically involved with for 3 years, a man who trusted you with access to his illegal activities. He didn't trust me with anything, Elena said quietly. He used me. He used my clearance, my access, my loyalty, and he put my brother at risk doing it. Your brother? Lieutenant Miguel Vasquez. He serves on the USS Hampton, one of the submarines that suffered equipment failures in areas where Marcus provided intelligence to the Russians. Elena's voice stayed level, but her hands clenched into fists under the table. Miguel could have died because of what Marcus did. Agent Chen nodded slowly. We've been investigating unusual submarine incidents for 8 months. Captain Kane's name came up several times, but we couldn't establish a clear connection. You've just provided that connection. What do you need me to do? Keep acting normal. Continue your regular duties. Don't change anything about your relationship with Kane. We need time to verify your evidence and build a bulletproof case. Elena felt something cold settle in her stomach. You want me to keep sleeping with him? Keep pretending I love him? I want you to keep him from suspecting anything has changed until we can move. If he realizes he's compromised, he'll run. Worse, he might warn his Russian contacts that we're onto their operation. The diner around them buzzed with normal morning conversations, truck drivers discussing routes, construction workers planning their day. Normal people leading normal lives, unaware that decisions made in this booth might prevent a war. How long? Elena asked. 2 weeks. Maybe 3. We need to trace his financial networks, identify other assets, coordinate with military intelligence. Elena stared out the diner's window at the highway leading back to the base. Back to Marcus, who would smile at her and kiss her and continue planning operations that put American sailors at risk. There's something else, she said. In the files there are references to Operation Blackwater. I've never heard of it, but the communication suggests it's larger than just submarine positions. Agent Chen's expression sharpened. What kind of references? Asset deployments, timeline accelerations, and ... double quotes. Elena hesitated. There are payments listed from multiple sources. Marcus isn't the only one. How many others? At least 4. Possibly more. The financial records show payments going back 5 years to different account numbers. Agent Chen was quiet for a long moment. Then, Commander, you may have uncovered the largest naval intelligence breach in decades. If this Operation Blackwater is what I think it is ... double quotes. What do you think it is? A systematic effort to compromise U.S. naval operations in the Pacific. Which means Captain Kane isn't just a traitor, he's part of a network that's been preparing for conflict. Elena felt the weight of the revelation settle on her shoulders. She'd stumbled onto something much larger than one corrupt officer selling information. This was preparation for war. I need to get back, she said, checking her watch. The morning briefing starts in 40 minutes. Remember, nothing changes. Act exactly as you would have yesterday. Elena stood to leave, then paused. Agent Chen? When this is over, when you arrest him, will I have to see him again? During the trial, yes, but Commander? Agent Chen's voice softened slightly. What you're doing takes incredible courage. Not many people would have the strength to turn in someone they love. Elena met her eyes. I don't love him anymore. I love my country. I love my brother. I love the sailors whose lives he's been gambling with. Marcus Kane. I don't even know who Marcus Kane really is. Elena drove back to the base in her gray Honda Civic, the same car she'd owned since Lieutenant Junior grade. The same car Marcus had teased her about upgrading now that she made commanders pay. Everything looked exactly the same as it had 6 hours ago. The same guard posts, the same traffic patterns, the same Norfolk morning humidity that made her uniform stick to her skin. But Elena felt like she was driving through an alien landscape. Base's main gate loomed ahead, manned by Petty Officer Rodriguez, who'd been checking her ID for 2 years. He smiled and waved her through with the same casual familiarity as always. Elena managed to smile back, wondering how many other officers passed through these gates carrying secrets that could destroy lives. Her phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Conference room moved to Building C. Admiral wants all senior staff present. Love you. 3 words that had once made her day brighter now felt like acid in her chest. Elena parked in her assigned spot right next to Marcus's BMW, the one he'd claimed to have gotten a good deal on through a military discount program. She now wondered who had really paid for it. The walk to Building C took her past the memorial wall where the names of sailors killed in the line of duty were engraved in black granite. Elena paused, as she did most mornings, reading the names of men and women who died protecting the country Marcus was betraying. Lieutenant Commander James Peterson, killed when his submarine hit a mine in 2019. Sonar technician Maria Santos, lost when her vessel suffered catastrophic flooding in 2020. Elena wondered how many of those deaths might have been prevented if foreign intelligence hadn't known their exact positions. Elena! She turned to find Lieutenant Commander David Kim jogging toward her. David had been her classmate at Annapolis, one of the few people who'd known her before she'd become Captain Kane's protege. He'd also been trying to ask her out for 3 years, politely backing off only when she'd started dating Marcus. "You look like hell," David said, falling into step beside her. "Late night with the intelligence reports again?" "Something like that." Elena found herself studying David's face, wondering if he could be trusted. In her new world of paranoia and investigation, everyone was potentially compromised. "Have you noticed anything unusual about submarine operations lately?" David's expression grew more serious. "Unusual how?" "Equipment failures, communication blackouts, things that seem coordinated." They paused outside Building C, where other officers were filing in for the morning briefing. David lowered his voice. "Elena, are you asking me this as a friend or as an intelligence officer conducting an investigation?" The question hit her like a physical blow. David knew her well enough to recognize when she was working, which meant she was already failing at Agent Chen's instructions to act normal. "As a friend," she said carefully. "I've been seeing patterns in the reports, and I wanted another perspective." David nodded slowly. "There have been more incidents than usual. Captain Kane mentioned it last week, said we might need to review maintenance protocols fleet-wide." "Why?" Elena's blood turned to ice. "When last week? Tuesday, I think. During the staff meeting you missed because you were in D.C. for that briefing." David studied her face. "Elena, what's going on?" Marcus had been discussing submarine equipment failures in her absence, framing them as maintenance issues rather than potential security breaches. He'd been controlling the narrative, ensuring that other officers saw the incidents as he wanted them to see them. "I should get inside," Elena said. "Thanks for the perspective, Elena." David caught her arm gently. "If something's wrong, you know you can talk to me, right? We've been friends for a long time." She looked into his concerned face and felt a stab of longing for the simple clarity of their academy days, when right and wrong had been clearly defined and the biggest worry was passing calculus. "I know," she said. "And David, be careful who you trust." The briefing room buzzed with the familiar energy of senior staff preparing for another day of managing America's Naval Intelligence operations. Elena took her usual seat at the long conference table, 2 chairs down from the head where Marcus always sat. She'd occupied this chair for 18 months. Ever since her promotion to commander had earned her a spot in the inner circle of Pacific Fleet Intelligence. Admiral Patricia Wells entered precisely at 0800, her gray hair pulled into the regulation bun that had somehow never loosened despite 3 decades of naval service. Elena had always admired the Admiral's reputation for integrity and tactical brilliance. Now she wondered if Admiral Wells suspected any of her senior staff of treason. "Ladies and gentlemen," Admiral Wells began, taking her position at the head of the table, "we have several developing situations that require immediate attention." Marcus leaned forward, his expression focused and professional. Elena watched him with new eyes, cataloging every micro-expression, every gesture. How had she never noticed the way his fingers drummed against the table when he was processing information? or the slight tightening around his eyes when sensitive operational details were discussed. "Commander Vasquez," Admiral Wells said, "your analysis of the recent submarine incidents. What's your assessment?" Elena felt every eye in the room turn toward her. This was the moment Agent Chen had warned her about maintaining her cover while knowing what she knew. She glanced at Marcus, who gave her an encouraging nod. "Admiral, I've identified troubling patterns in the equipment failures," Elena began, choosing her words carefully. "The incidents appear random individually, but collectively, they suggest potential vulnerabilities in our operational security." "Vulnerabilities how?" Admiral Wells asked. Elena pulled up her presentation on the room's main screen, displaying the tactical analysis she'd prepared before discovering Marcus's betrayal. "The timing and locations of the failures create gaps in our submarine coverage of strategic areas. If an adversary were tracking these incidents, they could potentially map our patrol patterns." Lieutenant Commander Kim nodded. "That aligns with what I've been seeing in communication intercepts. Increased Russian naval activity in areas where we've had equipment problems." Marcus's fingers stopped drumming. Elena caught the motion in her peripheral vision, the first sign that he was concerned about the direction of the conversation. "Gentlemen, ladies," Marcus interjected smoothly, "while Commander Vasquez's analysis is thorough, we should be careful not to see conspiracies. Where none exist, equipment fails. It's an unfortunate reality of operating complex systems in harsh environments." "With respect, Captain," Elena said, keeping her voice level, "the probability of these specific failures occurring in these specific locations at these specific times is less than 2%. Statistically, we're looking at coordinated interference." "Coordinated? By whom?" Admiral Wells asked. Elena met Marcus's eyes across the table. "Unknown, Admiral. But I recommend a full security review of all personnel with access to submarine deployment schedules." The room went quiet. Security reviews meant polygraph tests, financial audits, and comprehensive background investigations. Elena had just suggested that someone in this room or someone with access to the information discussed in this room might be compromised. Marcus's expression remained perfectly calm, but Elena caught the almost imperceptible tightening of his jaw. He was concerned now. "That's a significant undertaking," Admiral Wells said slowly, "and potentially damaging to morale if personnel feel they're under suspicion without cause." "Admiral," Elena pressed, "if there is a security breach, every day we delay gives the enemy more opportunities to exploit it. The next equipment failure could cost lives." Lieutenant Commander Sarah Park, the base's communications specialist, spoke up. "I can run analysis on all communications related to submarine deployments. If there are unauthorized transmissions, I should be able to identify them." Elena felt a surge of hope. Commander Park's investigation would quickly identify the same encrypted partition Elena had found. But Marcus was already shaking his head. "Commander Park, I appreciate your dedication, but we can't launch investigations based on statistical anomalies. We need concrete evidence of wrongdoing." "The statistical anomalies are concrete evidence," Elena said. "They indicate patterns that don't occur naturally. Patterns that could be explained by supply chain issues, maintenance backlogs, or a dozen other factors," Marcus replied. "We can't create paranoia in the ranks because our equipment is aging." Admiral Wells held up a hand for silence. "Captain Kane, Commander Vasquez, I want both of your recommendations in writing by tomorrow morning. Commander Park, run a preliminary analysis of communications protocols, but keep it quiet. I don't want the fleet thinking we suspect our own people without good reason." Elena nodded, knowing she was walking a tightrope. Push too hard, and Marcus might suspect she knew something. Don't push hard enough, and more submarines could be compromised. "Aye, Admiral." As the briefing moved on to other topics, supply logistics, personnel assignments, intelligence sharing with allied navies, Elena found herself studying each officer in the room. Agent Chen had said there were at least 4 compromised sources. Elena had identified Marcus, but who were the others? Lieutenant Commander Park seemed genuinely interested in uncovering communication irregularities. David Kim had appeared concerned about the submarine incidents. Commander Janet Torres from Strategic Planning had taken careful notes throughout Elena's presentation. Or maybe Elena was becoming paranoid, seeing traitors where none existed. Maybe Marcus was the only one, and everyone else was exactly who they appeared to be. The meeting ended with standard assignments and deadlines. As officers filed out, Marcus approached Elena's chair. "Good presentation," he said, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Your analysis was thorough, as always." Elena looked up at him, at the man she'd loved, trusted, shared her bed and her secrets with for 3 years. His blue eyes showed the same warmth they always had. His smile carried the same affection. If she hadn't seen the evidence herself, she would never have suspected him of anything worse than occasionally leaving his socks on the bedroom floor. "Thank you," she managed. "I just want to make sure we're not missing anything important. That's what makes you so good at this job," Marcus said. "Your attention to detail is extraordinary." The compliment felt like a knife twisting in her chest. He was praising her for the same skills that had uncovered his betrayal. "Marcus," she said carefully, "what if I'm right? What if someone is compromising our operations?" His expression grew serious. "Then we'll find them and stop them. But Elena, you need to be careful about making accusations without absolute proof. Careers can be destroyed by suspicion alone. Is that a warning?" Marcus laughed, the sound genuine and warm. "It's advice from someone who cares about your future. You're brilliant, but you're also young. Don't let your instincts make you enemies." Elena nodded, feeling sick. Even now, even while betraying everything they both had sworn to protect, Marcus was trying to protect her career. Or perhaps he was trying to protect himself by discouraging her investigation. "I'll be careful," she said. "Good. Want to grab dinner tonight? That Thai place you like?" The normalcy of the question was surreal. Here was a man who had been selling submarine positions to Russian intelligence asking her on a dinner date. A man who was planning to continue his treason while eating pad thai and discussing weekend plans. "I'd like that," Elena lied. Marcus kissed her forehead, the same gentle gesture he'd made thousands of times over 3 years, and left the briefing room. Elena sat alone at the conference table, staring at the tactical displays that showed the vast Pacific Ocean where American submarines moved in patterns that were no longer secret. Her secure phone buzzed with a text from Agent Chen. "Package received. Initial analysis confirms your assessment. Maintain current posture." Elena deleted the message and gathered her materials. She had work to do, reports to write, investigations to conduct, and a dinner date with a traitor to prepare for. But first, she needed to call her brother Miguel and make sure he was safe. Elena found a secure line in the intelligence center's communication room, a windowless space lined with equipment that could penetrate the electronic noise of military operations worldwide. She dialed the USS Hampton's direct line, hoping Miguel would be available for a brief conversation. USS Hampton, Communications. "This is Commander Vasquez, Naval Intelligence. I need to speak with Lieutenant Miguel Vasquez." "One moment, ma'am." Elena waited, listening to the subtle hum of secure communications equipment. The USS Hampton was currently on patrol in the South China Sea, operating in waters where Chinese and Russian naval forces had been increasingly active. If Marcus had provided the submarine's position to enemy intelligence, Miguel and his crew were sailing into a trap. "Elena, this is unexpected." Miguel's voice carried across thousands of miles of ocean, filtered through layers of encryption, but still unmistakably her little brother. "Is everything okay?" Elena had rehearsed this conversation during the drive back to base, trying to find A way to warn Miguel without revealing classified information or her ongoing investigation. I'm fine. How are you? How's the crew? We're good. A little tired. We've had some equipment issues that have kept us busy. But nothing we can't handle. Equipment issues. Elena's grip tightened on the phone. What kind of equipment issues? Sonar problems mostly. Lost contact with base for about 6 hours yesterday while we were troubleshooting. Engineering team finally tracked it down to a software glitch in the navigation system. 6 hours of communication. Blackout in contested waters. Elena pulled up her classified database access, searching for yesterday's operational reports. The USS Hampton's status showed normal patrol operations with no reported incidents. Someone had scrubbed the official record. Miguel, Elena said carefully, have you noticed any unusual activity in your patrol area? Foreign vessels, aircraft, anything that seemed out of place? Elena, you know I can't discuss operational details. Over the phone, even with you. I know, I'm just worried about you. Miguel's voice softened. Hey, what's going on? You sound scared. Elena closed her eyes, feeling the weight of everything she couldn't tell him. She couldn't explain that his commanding officer's girlfriend had discovered evidence of systematic intelligence leaks. She couldn't warn him that his submarine's position had been sold to Russian intelligence. She couldn't even tell him to be extra careful because that would be tantamount to revealing classified information. I've been analyzing some reports that suggest increased foreign intelligence gathering in your area, she said finally. Just trust your instincts, okay? If something feels wrong, it probably is. Elena, is this official advice or sisterly concern? Both. Miguel was quiet for a moment. There was something yesterday. During our communication blackout, we detected passive sonar contacts that didn't match any known friendly vessels. The captain logged it as possible fishing boats, but the sonar signatures were too regular, too organized. Like they were coordinating with each other. Elena felt ice in her veins. Russian submarines, positioned to intercept or attack the USS Hampton during its communication blackout. They'd been waiting in exactly the right place at exactly the right time. Miguel, I need you to promise me something. If you detect any unusual activity, anything at all, you report it immediately. Don't wait. Don't second-guess yourself. Don't worry about false alarms. Elena, you're scaring me. What aren't you telling me? Everything, Elena thought. I'm not telling you everything because if I do, you'll be in as much danger as I am. I'm not telling you that I love you and I want you to come home safe, she said. Can you promise me you'll be extra careful? I promise. But Elena, if there's something specific I should know, there isn't. Not yet. Just watch your back, okay? Okay. Hey, when I get back stateside, you want to grab dinner? It's been too long since we've had a chance to catch up. Elena thought about her dinner plans with Marcus that evening sitting across from a traitor while pretending everything was normal. I'd love that. Take care of yourself, Miguel. You too, Elena and Elena. Whatever's going on, whatever you're worried about, you're the smartest person I know. Trust your instincts. The line went dead, leaving Elena alone with the hum of communication equipment and the weight of knowledge she couldn't share. Her brother was in immediate danger, and she couldn't warn him without compromising the investigation that might save him and countless others. Elena's secure line rang. Agent Chen's number appeared on the display. Commander, we've had a development. Can you talk? Secure line. What's happened? Our preliminary analysis of Captain Kane's financial records shows payments that correspond exactly with submarine equipment failures. Someone has been coordinating these incidents from the inside. Elena wasn't surprised, but hearing it confirmed made her stomach lurch. Any indication of how they're causing the failures? That's where it gets interesting. The equipment isn't actually failing. Someone with high-level access has been sending false maintenance orders to submarine crews, instructing them to shut down communications and surface for emergency repairs that don't exist. False maintenance orders require authentication codes. High-level clearance. Exactly. Which brings us to our next problem. We've identified at least 3 other officers who have accessed the maintenance order system in conjunction with submarine incidents. Elena leaned against the communication console. Who? We're still confirming identities, but Commander, one of them accessed the system yesterday to issue maintenance orders to the USS Hampton, Elena's brother's submarine. Someone had ordered Miguel's crew to shut down communications and surface in waters where Russian vessels were waiting. Agent Chen, the USS Hampton is my brother's submarine. He's in immediate danger. We know. We're coordinating with Pacific Fleet Command to issue new orders that will move the Hampton out of the compromised area. But we have to do it carefully. If we act too quickly, we'll alert the network that we're onto them. How long will it take? 6 hours minimum, possibly 12. Elena stared at the communication equipment surrounding her, thinking about Miguel and his crew sailing through hostile waters while enemy forces tracked their every movement. Commander, Agent Chen continued, we need you to help us identify the other compromised officers. Captain Kane is part of a network, and we need to roll up the entire operation before they realize we're investigating. What do you need me to do? Tonight, at dinner with Kane, we need you to probe for information about his contacts. Find out who else might be involved. Elena thought about sitting across from Marcus, making conversation while knowing he'd put her brother at risk. Any suggestions on how to do that without arousing suspicion? Express concern about the investigation you proposed this morning. Ask if he thinks anyone on the staff might be compromised. Watch his reactions, listen for names he mentions or avoids mentioning. You want me to help him identify potential suspects in his own operation? We want you to help him reveal who his co-conspirators are. If he's worried about the investigation, he'll be thinking about protecting his network. He might inadvertently give us the information we need. Elena checked her watch. 4 hours until her dinner date with a traitor who had put her brother's life at risk. I'll do it, she said. But Agent Chen? If something happens to my brother because we waited too long to act, it won't. We have assets in the area who can intervene if necessary. Your brother is going to be safe, Commander. I promise you that. Elena hoped Agent Chen was right. Because if Miguel died because of Marcus's betrayal, Elena wasn't sure she could maintain her cover long enough to see justice done. She was afraid she might kill Marcus Kane with her bare hands instead. Elena spent the afternoon crafting her written report for Admiral Wells, choosing each word carefully to build a case for the security investigation, without revealing that she already knew the investigation's primary target. It was a delicate balance, too aggressive, and Marcus might suspect her of having inside information. Too passive, and the investigation might be delayed or dismissed entirely. At 16:30 hours, she submitted the report through official channels and began preparing for dinner with the enemy. Elena's apartment felt different now, contaminated by the knowledge of what Marcus had done there. The kitchen where he'd made her coffee every morning for 3 years. The living room where they'd watched movies and discussed their future together. The bedroom where he'd held her while planning his next betrayal of their country. She stood before her closet, selecting an outfit for dinner with a traitor. The blue dress Marcus had complimented her on last month. The black pants and blazer that made her look professional and serious. In the end, she chose jeans and a sweater, casual, comfortable. The kind of outfit that suggested she wasn't thinking too hard about the evening. Elena's reflection in the bathroom mirror showed the strain of the day. Dark circles under her eyes, tension lines around her mouth, a pallor that suggested stress and sleepless nights. She applied concealer and lipstick, transforming herself back into the Elena Vasquez that Marcus expected to see. Her phone buzzed with a text. Running a few minutes late. Traffic from base was terrible. Order me the usual if you get there first. Love you, love you. Elena stared at the words, remembering when they'd made her heart race with happiness. Now, they made her feel like she might vomit. She arrived at Bangkok Garden 15 minutes early, choosing a corner table that offered clear views of both entrances and kept her back to the wall. Operational security habits that Marcus had taught her. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was using his training to prepare for his interrogation. The restaurant buzzed with its usual evening crowd, families celebrating birthdays, couples on dates, military personnel from nearby bases unwinding after long days. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that their safety depended on people like Elena making impossible choices. Marcus arrived 10 minutes late, wearing the navy polo shirt and khakis that had become his standard off-duty uniform. He looked exactly like what he was supposed to be, a dedicated naval officer, a trustworthy man, someone who had earned the right to access America's most sensitive secrets. "Sorry I'm late," he said, kissing her cheek before taking the opposite seat. "Admiral Wells wanted to discuss your report privately." Elena's pulse spiked. What did she say? "She's impressed by your analysis but concerned about the implications. A security investigation of senior staff would send ripples through the entire Pacific Fleet Command structure. Ripples are better than security breaches." Marcus smiled, signaling the waitress before turning his attention back to Elena. "She asked me to evaluate your evidence personally, give her my assessment of whether the investigation is warranted." Elena kept her expression neutral, but internally she was recalibrating everything. Admiral Wells had essentially asked Marcus to investigate himself. Either the Admiral was completely unaware of his treachery, or she was setting a trap. "What?" "Will you tell her that your instincts are usually right, but this time I think you're seeing patterns where none exist?" Marcus reached across the table to take her hand. "Elena, I've been thinking about what you said this morning. About statistical probabilities and coordinated interference. And I think you're under too much stress. You've been working 16-hour days for months, analyzing every piece of intelligence that crosses your desk. Sometimes when we're that focused, we start seeing conspiracies everywhere." Elena felt the familiar surge of anger that came with being patronized, but she forced herself to remain calm. "You think I'm imagining things? I think you're brilliant and dedicated, but you're also human. Sometimes brilliant people see patterns that aren't there because they want to solve puzzles that might not exist." The waitress appeared to take their order. Elena requested her usual pad thai, while Marcus ordered green curry, the same meal they'd shared dozens of times over 3 years. The normalcy of it felt surreal. "Marcus," Elena said once they were alone again, "what if I'm right? What if someone is compromising submarine operations?" Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying her face. "Then we'd be dealing with the most serious security breach in naval history. The kind of breach that would require multiple people in positions of trust." "Multiple people like who?" "Well, you'd need someone with access to deployment schedules. Someone who could issue false maintenance orders. Someone in communications who could coordinate timing." Marcus's fingers drummed against the table, that nervous habit Elena now recognized as his tell when processing sensitive information. "You'd basically need a network of conspirators embedded throughout the command structure." Elena felt a chill. Marcus was describing exactly what Agent Chen had told her, a network of compromised officers. But was he describing it as a hypothetical threat, or was he inadvertently revealing the structure of his own operation? "Do you think that's possible?" she asked. "Possible? Yes, likely. No, that level of coordination would require years of planning and recruitment. The kind of operation that foreign intelligence services dream about, but rarely achieve." Elena watched his face carefully. "But if it were happening, how would we detect it?" "Financial audits would be the most obvious starting point. Traitors usually do it for money, and money leaves trails. Communication analysis would be another approach, looking for unauthorized transmissions or encrypted communications that don't follow normal protocols. Marcus was giving her a roadmap for investigating his own crimes. Either he was supremely confident in his operational security, or he was testing to see how much she already knew. What about the people involved? Elena pressed. How would you identify potential conspirators? Marcus was quiet for a moment, his fingers continuing their rhythmic drumming. You'd look for people with financial pressure. Gambling debts, expensive. Divorces, medical bills, they can't afford. You'd look for people with foreign contacts or overseas travel that doesn't match their official duties. And you'd look for people with access to the specific information that's been compromised. Their food arrived, providing a natural break in the conversation. Elena used the pause to process what Marcus had revealed. He'd essentially described the profile of a typical intelligence asset, while simultaneously providing details about how such an operation would function. Elena, Marcus said as they began eating, I want you to promise me something. What? If you continue pursuing this investigation, be very careful about who you trust. If there really is a network of compromised officers, they'll be watching for anyone who gets too close to the truth. Elena met his eyes across the table. Are you trying to protect me or warn me off? Both. You're the most important thing in my life, Elena. I couldn't stand to see you get hurt because you stumbled onto something dangerous. The words would have been romantic 3 days ago. Now they sounded like a threat. Marcus, who on the senior staff would you be most concerned about? If you had to guess who might be vulnerable to foreign recruitment. Marcus set down his fork, considering the question carefully. That's a dangerous game, Elena, speculating about colleagues without evidence. Hypothetically. Marcus paused, then continued. Commander Park has family in South Korea. That could create pressure points if foreign intelligence wanted to exploit them. Lieutenant Commander Kim has been dating a civilian contractor who works with defense companies. Potential access to information outside normal channels. Commander Torres recently went through an expensive divorce. Elena felt sick. Marcus was either throwing suspicion on innocent colleagues, or he was revealing the actual recruitment criteria for his network. Each person he'd mentioned had access to critical systems and potential vulnerabilities that foreign intelligence could exploit. What about you? Elena asked quietly. If someone were evaluating your vulnerabilities, what would they find? Marcus smiled, the expression genuine and warm. Nothing interesting. I've got money in the bank, no family overseas, no vices expensive enough to create financial pressure. I'm boring, Elena, which is probably why you fell for me. I'm safe and predictable. The lie was so smooth, so confident, that Elena might have believed it if she hadn't seen his financial records. Marcus had received over $14 million in cryptocurrency payments over 3 years. He owned properties in the Cayman Islands and Switzerland that weren't reflected in any official financial disclosure. He was anything but boring and predictable. You are many things, Elena said carefully, but boring isn't one of them. Thank you, I think. Elena's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at the screen. Hampton reports all clear. Situation stable. FBI Agent Chen was telling her that Miguel was safe. Elena felt some of the tension leave her shoulders, but she knew the reprieve was temporary. As long as Marcus and his network remained operational, every submarine was at risk. Work? Marcus asked, noticing her check the phone. Just an update on a routine matter. Nothing urgent. Good. I was hoping we could have one evening without the weight of national security on our shoulders. Elena looked at the man across from her, the man she'd loved, trusted, and shared her life with for 3 years. He was making casual conversation about work while simultaneously running an operation that endangered every sailor in the Pacific Fleet. The cognitive dissonance was staggering. "Marcus," she said, "do you ever think about what would happen if we uncovered a major security breach? The kind of thing that would make headlines, destroy careers, maybe even prevent a war? That's a grim topic for dinner conversation." Humor. "Me?" Marcus considered the question, his expression growing serious. "I think it would depend on how the breach was handled. If it was covered up or minimized, the damage could continue indefinitely. If it was exposed publicly, it might prevent immediate damage but could also reveal intelligence methods and sources. What if the person who discovered the breach was someone close to the perpetrators? Someone who had personal relationships with the people involved? That would be the worst possible scenario," Marcus said immediately. "Personal relationships would complicate everything. The person would have to choose between loyalty to friends and loyalty to country. Most people aren't strong enough to make that choice objectively." Elena felt like he was speaking directly to her situation. "What would you do if you discovered that someone you cared about was betraying everything you believed in?" Marcus reached across the table and took her hand again. "I'd hope I'd have the strength to do the right thing, regardless of personal cost. But honestly, Elena, I'm not sure anyone knows how they'd react until they're in that situation. And if the betrayal put people you loved at risk, then the choice would be easier. I'd do whatever was necessary to protect the people I care about, even if it meant destroying someone I cared about even more." Elena stared into his blue eyes, searching for any sign that he understood the irony of his words. Marcus Kane was describing exactly what she was doing to him, destroying someone she cared about to protect people she loved even more. "That's a comforting thought," she said. "Elena, why are we talking about this? You haven't discovered something, have you?" The question sent alarm bells through Elena's mind. Was Marcus probing to see if she knew about his activities? Or was he genuinely concerned about her well-being? "No," she lied smoothly. "I've just been thinking about moral courage lately. About what it takes to do the right thing when the right thing is painful." Marcus squeezed her hand. "Whatever's troubling you, we'll figure it out together. We're a team, Elena. We face things together." A team. Elena almost laughed at the bitter irony. They were a team in the same way that a spy and her target were a team bound together by deception, moving toward an outcome that only one of them understood. "I should probably get some sleep," Elena said, checking her watch. "Tomorrow's going to be a long day." "Of course. Let me get the check." As Marcus signaled the waitress, Elena's phone buzzed with another message. This one was from Agent Chen. "Need to meet tomorrow, 0600, new developments. Critical." Elena deleted the message and smiled at Marcus as he returned his attention to her. "Thank you for dinner. And for listening to my paranoid theories. They're not paranoid if they're right," Marcus said. "And Elena, if you do uncover something significant, promise me you'll be careful how you handle it. The wrong move could be dangerous for everyone involved." "I promise," Elena said. It was a promise she intended to keep, just not in the way Marcus expected. Elena was going to be very careful about how she handled his betrayal. She was going to be methodical, thorough, and absolutely ruthless in ensuring that Marcus Kane and his network never endangered another American sailor. But first, she was going to find out what Agent Chen had discovered that was critical enough to require a dawn meeting. As they left the restaurant together, Marcus's arm around her shoulders in a gesture of casual affection, Elena felt like she was walking with a ghost. The man she'd loved was gone, replaced by a stranger wearing his face and speaking with his voice. Tomorrow she would begin the process of destroying him completely. Tonight, she would go home with him one last time and pretend that her heart wasn't breaking with every breath. Elena's apartment felt like a stage, set for a play she no longer wanted to perform. Marcus moved through their shared space with the easy familiarity of 3 years, hanging his jacket in the closet where it had hung beside hers countless times before. He opened a bottle of wine, a Pinot Noir, they'd discovered together during a weekend trip to Virginia's wine country, and poured 2 glasses. "To successful investigations," he said, raising his glass in a toast. Elena lifted her glass, the irony of the toast not lost on her. "To the truth, wherever it leads." They drank, and Elena tasted betrayal in every sip. Marcus settled onto the couch, patting the cushion beside him in invitation. Elena joined him, acutely aware of the physical space between them, close enough to maintain the illusion of intimacy, far enough to prepare for the emotional distance that was coming. "You seem tense tonight," Marcus observed, his arm settling around her shoulders. "More than usual, I mean. The investigation has you really worried." Elena leaned against him, her body remembering 3 years of comfort while her mind catalogued evidence of treason. "I keep thinking about the implications. If someone is compromising submarine operations, American sailors are dying because of it. Elena, you can't take responsibility for every theoretical threat. That way lies madness. It's not theoretical if it's actually happening." Marcus was quiet for a moment, his fingers tracing absent patterns on her arm. "What would you do if you discovered concrete evidence of betrayal? Not theoretical patterns or statistical anomalies, but actual proof that someone was selling information to foreign intelligence." Elena's pulse quickened. Was Marcus testing her loyalty, or was he genuinely curious about her moral framework? "I'd report it immediately through proper channels," she said. "No matter who was involved or what the personal cost might be. Even if reporting it destroyed someone you cared about." Elena turned to look at him directly. "Especially then. The people we care about should be held to higher standards, not lower ones." Marcus nodded slowly. "That's what I admire about you, Elena, your moral clarity. You see the world in terms of right and wrong, with very little gray area. Some things are black and white. Treason is one of them. Is it though? What if someone was providing intelligence to prevent a war? What if their betrayal saved more lives than it cost?" Elena felt like she was standing on the edge of a cliff. Are we still speaking hypothetically? Of course. But it's an interesting philosophical question. At what point does betraying your country become a moral imperative? Elena studied his face, searching for any sign that he might be justifying his own actions. "I don't think it ever does. There are legal channels for conscientious objection, whistleblower protections, congressional oversight. Selling secrets to foreign powers isn't moral activism, it's treason. But what if those legal channels are compromised? What if the system itself is corrupt? Then you work to change the system, not betray it." Marcus smiled, but the expression didn't reach his eyes. "You make it sound simple." "The choice is simple. Following through might be difficult, but the moral calculation is straightforward." Marcus lifted his wine glass, staring into the dark liquid as if it might contain answers. "Elena, there's something I need to tell you." Elena's heart stopped. Was he about to confess? Had her questions pushed him to reveal his involvement with Russian intelligence? "What is it?" "I've been thinking about our future together, about marriage, children, growing old together. But lately, I've been wondering if we want the same things." Elena blinked, caught off guard by the shift from philosophical discussion to relationship evaluation. "What do you mean? You have such clear convictions about duty and loyalty, such unwavering faith in institutions and systems. Sometimes I wonder if there's room in your worldview for human complexity." "Human complexity?" "People make mistakes. Elena, good people sometimes make bad choices for complicated reasons. I hope, if you ever discovered that someone you loved had made terrible mistakes, you'd be able to see past the mistakes to the person underneath." Elena felt like she was having 2 conversations simultaneously, one about their relationship and another about his treason. Marcus, if someone I loved had made terrible mistakes that hurt other people, I'd want them to make it right. Face the consequences, accept responsibility, do whatever was necessary to prevent further harm. Even if facing consequences destroyed them. Better to be destroyed by truth than to live in lies. Marcus set down his wine glass and turned to face her fully. What if I told you that I had made mistakes? Serious ones that could hurt people we both care about? Elena's breath caught. This was the moment she'd been both dreading and hoping for. Marcus on the verge of confession, perhaps. Seeking absolution or understanding. What kind of mistakes? Marcus stared at her for a long moment, and Elena could see him wrestling with some internal decision. Finally he shook his head. Nothing specific, just hypothetical questions about forgiveness and redemption. Elena felt a surge of disappointment and relief in equal measure. Marcus had come close to confessing, but had ultimately chosen to maintain his deception. Marcus, if you had something to tell me, I hope you'd trust me enough to be honest. I do trust you. That's not the issue. Then what is? The issue is that some truths are too dangerous to share. Some mistakes have consequences that extend far beyond the person who made them. Elena leaned forward, studying his face intently. Are you trying to tell me something? Marcus reached out and cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs tracing along her cheekbones with familiar tenderness. I'm trying to tell you that I love you more than anything in this world. And that sometimes love requires difficult choices. He kissed her then, and Elena tasted desperation beneath the familiar warmth. Marcus was saying goodbye, though he didn't know she understood that. He was preparing for an ending that he thought would come on his terms. When the kiss ended, Elena rested her forehead against his. Marcus, whatever's troubling you, we can face it together. Can we? If I told you that everything you thought you knew about me was wrong, could you still love me? Elena felt tears prick at her eyes, not because she loved him, but because she remembered loving him. Because the man she'd fallen for 3 years ago might have been real, might have existed beneath the traitor who had taken his place. I don't know, she said honestly. I'd like to think so, but I don't know. Marcus nodded, as if her answer confirmed something he'd already suspected. That's what I thought. They sat in silence for several minutes, holding each other while the truth stretched between them like a chasm neither could cross. Elena knew this was likely their last quiet moment together before everything collapsed. Marcus seemed to sense it too, though he couldn't know the specific forces that were about to destroy their shared life. I should get some sleep, Elena said finally. Early morning tomorrow, of course. I'll be up early too. Admiral Wells wants a breakfast meeting to discuss your security investigation proposal. Elena nodded, wondering if Admiral Wells was part of Marcus's network or if she was genuinely seeking Marcus's assessment of Elena's concerns. Tomorrow's breakfast meeting might determine whether the investigation proceeded or was quietly buried. They went through the familiar rituals of preparing for bed, brushing teeth, changing clothes, setting alarms. 3 years of shared domestic routines that now felt like archaeological evidence of a relationship that had died the moment Elena discovered the encrypted files. Marcus fell asleep quickly, his breathing settling into the deep rhythm Elena had listened to for countless nights. She lay awake beside him, staring at the ceiling and thinking about Agent Chen's message. What new developments required a dawn meeting? Had they identified the other compromised officers? Had Marcus's network realized they were under investigation? At 0300, Elena's secure phone vibrated silently on her nightstand. A message from Agent Chen. Hampshire intercepted enemy communications. Your brother's submarine was target of planned attack. Attack prevented. Network escalating timeline. Meet at 0530, not 0600. Bring all personal files on Kane.Elena. Read the message twice before deleting it. Miguel had been the target of a planned attack, an attack that had been prevented because Elena had discovered Marcus's betrayal in time. Her brother was alive because she'd chosen country over love, duty over personal loyalty. But if the network was escalating their timeline, it meant they suspected they were under investigation, which meant Elena's time undercover was running out. She looked at Marcus sleeping peacefully beside her, his face relaxed and unguarded in the darkness. In 8 hours, maybe 12, he would be in federal custody facing charges of treason, espionage, and conspiracy. His life as he knew it would be over. Elena felt no satisfaction in the knowledge, only a deep sadness for what they'd lost, and what had never really existed in the first place. Marcus Kane had been alive from the beginning, and Elena had been both his greatest success and his ultimate downfall. She slipped out of bed carefully, gathered the personal files she'd need for her meeting with Agent Chen, and prepared for the day that would end everything. We're deep into this incredible story now, and I hope you're as captivated as I am by these unfolding events. The amount of effort that goes into researching, writing, and narrating these novel-length stories is immense. We're talking about creating content equivalent to a published book. But it's worth it to bring you stories that truly engage and transport you to another world. If you're enjoying this journey so far, please take a second to like this video and share it with friends who appreciate great storytelling. Your support means everything and helps us continue creating these detailed, epic narratives. We still have so much more to discover together. So let's see how this situation unfolds. Elena arrived at the predetermined meeting location, a 24-hour diner 30 miles from the naval base, at 0525. 5 minutes before the revised meeting time. Agent Chen was already there, occupying a corner booth with clear sightlines to all entrances and exits. The FBI agent looked like she hadn't slept, her usually immaculate appearance showing signs of an all-night investigation. "Commander, Agent," Chen said as Elena slid into the opposite seat. "Thank you for coming early. We have a situation." Elena placed a manila folder on the table between them, 3 years of personal files, photographs, letters, and documentation of her relationship with Marcus Kane, evidence that would help the FBI understand the depth of Marcus's deception and the scope of his access to classified information. "You said the network was escalating their timeline. What's happened?" Agent Chen opened her own folder, revealing surveillance photographs and communication intercepts. At 0130 this morning, we detected encrypted burst transmissions from Captain Kane's personal residence to a known Russian intelligence cutout in Mexico City. The transmission was brief but indicated an emergency protocol activation. Elena felt cold. "He knows we're investigating." "We don't think so, not specifically. But something spooked him." The transmission included references to harvest acceleration and asset extraction preparation he's preparing to run. Elena stared at the surveillance photos showing Marcus's car leaving their apartment building at 0147, less than 2 hours after she'd read Agent Chen's message about the intercepted enemy communications. Was he monitoring my phone, my communications? That's what we're trying to determine. But Commander, there's something else. The Hampshire intercepts I mentioned, they weren't just planning to attack your brother's submarine. They were planning to capture it. Elena felt the world tilt. Capture it? A Russian Akula-class submarine was positioned to disable the USS Hampshire's propulsion and force it to surface. Then a surface fleet would have surrounded it, claiming international waters salvage rights while stripping it of intelligence and technology. That's an act of war. Only if they got caught. If the Hampshire had simply disappeared during a routine patrol, it would have been classified as lost at sea. The Russians would have had weeks or months to extract everything valuable before anyone realized what had happened. Elena thought about Miguel and his crew, 300 American sailors who would have disappeared into Russian custody, their families never knowing their fate. How many submarines were targeted? We're still analyzing the communications, but at least 6 vessels over the past 18 months. The USS Hampton was just the most recent. Agent Chen slid another photograph across the table. It showed Marcus entering the base's secure communications center at 0200 that morning. Captain Kane accessed classified communication systems 2 hours ago. We believe he was checking to see if any of the planned operations had been compromised. When he discovered that the Hampshire had been moved out of the target area, he activated emergency protocols. Elena studied the timestamp on the photograph. Marcus had left their apartment while she was sleeping, driven to the base, accessed classified systems, and returned home all while she lay unconscious beside the empty space where he should have been. How long do we have before he runs? Hours. Maybe less. He's scheduled to meet with Admiral Wells this morning to discuss your security investigation proposal. Our assessment is that he'll use that meeting to determine how much the Navy suspects, then make his decision about extraction. Elena checked her watch. 0545. Marcus's alarm would go off in 15 minutes, and he would expect to find her sleeping peacefully beside him, unaware that she'd discovered his midnight activities. What do you need me to do? Go home. Act normal. Attend the meeting with Admiral Wells if you're invited. But Elena ... double quotes Agent Chen's expression grew grim. If Captain Kane realizes you're onto him, you could be in serious physical danger. These people have killed to protect their operation. Killed. Who? Agent Chen opened another file, revealing a photograph Elena recognized. Lieutenant Commander James Peterson, whose name was engraved on the memorial wall at the base. Peterson wasn't killed by a mine. He was murdered because he discovered irregularities in submarine deployment schedules. The mine was staged to cover up his assassination. Elena stared at the photograph of a man she'd walked past every morning for 2 years. How many others? We're investigating at least 4 suspicious deaths of personnel who had access to compromised information. Elena, these people don't hesitate to eliminate threats. Elena thought about Marcus sleeping peacefully in their bed, the same man who had apparently authorized the murder of fellow naval officers. He's been living with me for 3 years. If he wanted me dead, he's had plenty of opportunities. Unless you were more valuable alive. You've provided him with perfect cover, a dedicated intelligence officer whose loyalty was above suspicion, whose security clearance gave him access to information he couldn't obtain elsewhere. The words hit Elena like physical blows. Her relationship with Marcus hadn't been a coincidence or a romance. It had been a recruitment operation that had lasted 3 years. She'd been an unwitting asset, manipulated and exploited by someone who had never loved her at all. Commander, Agent Chen said. Gently, I know this is difficult. But we need you to maintain your cover for a few more hours. Just until we can coordinate the arrests of his entire network. Elena nodded, feeling numb. How many others are there? At least 4 confirmed co-conspirators, possibly more. Captain, Kane isn't just a traitor, he's been running a recruitment and coordination cell within the Pacific Fleet, the most successful penetration of U.S. naval intelligence in history. Elena gathered the personal files from the table, evidence of a 3-year lie that had endangered her brother and killed her colleagues. When you arrest him, I want to be there. Elena, that's not. I want to see his face when he realizes I'm the one who brought him down. After 3 years of lies and manipulation, I've earned that much. Agent Chen studied her for a moment, then nodded. We'll see what we can arrange. But Elena, be careful. Marcus Kane is a professional intelligence operative who's been playing a long game for years. Don't underestimate what he's capable of if he feels cornered. Elena stood to leave, checking her watch again. She had 45 minutes to drive home, slip back into bed, and convince Marcus that she'd been sleeping peacefully while his world collapsed around him. Agent Chen? When this is over, when you've arrested everyone involved, how do I go back? To normal? How do I trust anyone ever again? Agent Chen's expression softened. You learned to trust your instincts. They led you to the truth this time, even when the truth was painful. Hold on to that. Elena drove back toward the base as dawn broke over the Virginia coast, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that reminded her of the morning 3 years ago, when Marcus had first told her he loved her. She'd believed him then, trusted him completely, built her life around the assumption that they were building something together. Now she understood that she'd been building her life around a lie, and Marcus had been using her love as a weapon against her own country. The sun was fully above the horizon when Elena slipped back into their apartment. Marcus was still sleeping, his breathing deep and even, showing no signs of the night's activities. Elena undressed quietly and slid back into bed, positioning herself exactly as she'd been when she'd left. Marcus's alarm sounded at 0600, and he woke with the efficiency of someone accustomed to military schedules. "Morning, beautiful," he said, kissing her forehead in the same gesture he'd made thousands of times. Elena managed to smile sleepily. "Morning. You sleep well?" "Like a baby, you?" "Like the dead," Elena said, and meant it. The Elena who had loved Marcus Kane was dead, killed by the truth of what he really was. Marcus showered and dressed for his meeting with Admiral Wells while Elena pretended to prepare for another normal day. They moved through their morning routines with the practiced choreography of a long-term couple, both of them performing roles that no longer matched their true intentions. "I might be late tonight," Marcus said, adjusting his uniform in the bedroom mirror. "This meeting with the Admiral could lead to extended discussions about your investigation proposal." Elena watched him check his appearance, noting the careful attention to details that suggested he was preparing for more than just a meeting. "Will you need me there?" "Not initially, but Elena." Marcus turned to face her directly. "If the Admiral decides to move forward with a full security investigation, things could get complicated quickly. There might be disruptions to normal operations, changes in personnel assignments, that sort of thing. Are you warning me about something specific?" Marcus crossed to where she stood, placing his hands on her shoulders in a gesture that had once made her feel cherished and protected. Now it felt like a predator claiming its territory. "I'm telling you that I love you, and that love sometimes requires difficult sacrifices. If things change rapidly, if circumstances force us apart temporarily, I want you to know that everything I've done has been motivated by my feelings for you." Elena stared into his blue eyes, searching for any trace of the man she'd thought she'd known. "Marcus, what aren't you telling me?" He kissed her then, a long tender kiss that felt like goodbye. When it ended, he rested his forehead against hers. "I'm telling you that no matter what happens today, no matter what you might hear about me, remember that I loved you as much as I was capable of loving anyone." Elena felt tears in her eyes, not for what she was losing, but for what she'd never really had. "I'll remember." Marcus left for his meeting with Admiral Wells, and Elena was alone in their apartment with the ghosts of 3 years of lies. She had 90 minutes before she needed to report to the base. 90 minutes to grieve for the relationship that had never existed and prepare for the confrontation that would end everything. Elena made coffee in the kitchen where Marcus had made her breakfast countless times, and she tried to remember what it had felt like to be happy. The memory was already fading, replaced by the cold clarity of betrayal and the grim satisfaction of justice about to be served. Her secure phone buzzed with a message from Agent Chen. "Assets in position. Arrests begin at 1,000 hours. Maintain distance from Kane after his meeting with Admiral Wells." Elena deleted the message and checked her service weapon, ensuring it was loaded and ready. She didn't expect to need it, but 3 years of living with an enemy agent had taught her that expectations could be deadly. At 0800, Elena left for what she expected to be the most important day of her naval career, the day she would watch the man she'd loved be arrested for treason, and the day she would finally understand the true cost of loving the wrong person completely. Admiral Patricia Wells' office occupied a corner of Building A with windows that overlooked the harbor where submarines came and went on missions that shaped the balance of global power. Elena had been in this office dozens of times over the past 2 years, usually to brief the Admiral on intelligence assessments or operational concerns. Today, she'd been summoned to observe Marcus's meeting with Admiral Wells, a meeting that would determine whether Elena's security investigation moved forward or was quietly buried. Elena arrived at 0845 to find the Admiral reviewing files with the methodical attention that had earned her 3 stars and the respect of every officer in the Pacific Fleet. Admiral Wells was 62 years old, a submariner who'd commanded vessels in the Cold War and understood better than most the deadly stakes of intelligence warfare. "Commander Vasquez," Admiral Wells said without looking up from her files. "Take a seat. Captain Kane will be here shortly, and I want you present for this discussion." Elena sat in one of the leather chairs facing the Admiral's desk, trying to appear calm while her heart hammered against her ribs. In 1 hour and 15 minutes, FBI agents would begin arresting Marcus and his co-conspirators. This meeting would determine whether Admiral Wells was part of the network or an unwitting victim of it. "Admiral, may I ask why you want me present?" Admiral Wells finally looked up, her gray eyes sharp with an intelligence that had navigated 4 decades of naval politics and operational command. "Because your investigation proposal has raised questions that need answering, and I want to hear both perspectives before making decisions that could affect the entire Pacific Fleet." A knock at the door interrupted them. Marcus entered in full dress uniform, his appearance immaculate and his bearing confident. Elena watched him take the seat beside hers, noting the subtle tension in his shoulders that suggested he was prepared for confrontation. "Captain Kane," Admiral Wells said, "thank you for coming. I've reviewed Commander Vasquez's analysis of the submarine incidents, and I need your assessment of her conclusions." Marcus opened a folder he'd brought with him, revealing charts and statistical analyses that Elena recognized as more sophisticated versions of her own work. "Admiral, I've conducted an independent review of the data, and while I respect Commander Vasquez's analytical skills, I believe she's identified correlation rather than causation." Admiral Wells leaned forward. "Explain the submarine incidents." "She's documented do show statistical clustering, but that clustering can be explained by factors other than enemy action. Budget constraints have forced us to extend maintenance cycles, which increases the probability of equipment failures. Operational tempo in contested waters has increased stress on both equipment and personnel. And frankly, some of our submarine fleet is aging beyond optimal operational parameters." Elena listened to Marcus present a compelling case for dismissing her investigation, using her own data to argue against the conclusions she'd reached. He was protecting his operation by framing the evidence in a way that suggested incompetence rather than treachery. "Commander Vasquez," Admiral Wells said, "how do you respond to Captain Kane's assessment?" Elena chose her words carefully, knowing that this conversation would likely be recorded and could become evidence in Marcus's eventual trial. "Admiral, Captain Kane raises valid points about equipment aging and operational stress. But the timing of these incidents, combined with increased enemy naval activity in the affected areas, suggests coordination that extends beyond mechanical failure." "What kind of coordination?" "Someone with access to submarine deployment schedules could predict when our vessels would be most vulnerable. Equipment failures that force communication blackouts and emergency surfacing would create opportunities for enemy forces to gather intelligence or stage incidents." Marcus shook his head. "Admiral, that level of coordination would require multiple conspirators with access to highly classified information. The security protocols governing submarine operations make such a breach virtually impossible." "Virtually impossible," Admiral Wells repeated. "But not entirely impossible." "No, Admiral. But the probability is so low that resources spent investigating It would be better directed toward actual operational concerns. Admiral Wells was quiet for a long moment, studying both officers with an expression Elena couldn't read. Finally, the Admiral opened her own folder and placed several photographs on the desk. Elena recognized them. Immediately, surveillance photos of Marcus entering the Secure Communications Center at 0200 that morning. "Captain Kane," Admiral Wells said quietly, "can you explain why you accessed classified communication systems at 2 in the morning?" Marcus's confident expression flickered for just a moment, a micro-expression of surprise that Elena caught. But that could easily be explained as confusion rather than guilt. "Admiral, I received an automated alert about communication irregularities with several submarine units. I went in to verify that our vessels were maintaining proper contact protocols. At 2 in the morning? Security concerns don't observe normal business hours, Admiral." Admiral Wells placed another photograph on the desk, Marcus's car leaving the base at 0230. "And this?" "I determined that the communication irregularities were within normal parameters and returned home." Elena watched the exchange with growing tension. Admiral Wells was either conducting a legitimate security investigation or she was part of Marcus's network, and this was an elaborate trap. "Captain Kane," Admiral Wells continued, "in your assessment of Commander Vasquez's investigation proposal, you mentioned that a security breach would require multiple conspirators. How many people would have the access necessary to compromise? Submarine operations?" Marcus's fingers began their familiar drumming pattern against his knee. "Admiral, hypothetically speaking, you'd need someone with access to deployment schedules, someone who could issue false maintenance orders, someone in communications who could coordinate timing, and someone in intelligence who could provide operational details to foreign contacts. 4 people minimum. At least. Possibly more, depending on the scope of the operation." Admiral Wells made a note in her file. "And these 4 hypothetical conspirators would need to coordinate their activities without arousing suspicion from their colleagues, their superiors, or our counterintelligence operations." "Yes, Admiral. Which is why such an operation is highly unlikely. The operational security challenges would be enormous." Elena felt like she was watching Marcus deconstruct his own criminal enterprise while simultaneously arguing that it couldn't exist. The cognitive dissonance was staggering. Admiral Wells turned to Elena. "Commander, if such a network did exist, how would you recommend investigating it?" "Financial audits would be the starting point," Elena said, echoing Marcus's advice from the previous evening. "Traders usually operate for financial gain, and large payments leave traces. Communication analysis would identify unauthorized transmissions, and behavioral analysis would reveal patterns of suspicious activity, such as accessing classified systems at unusual hours." Elena glanced at Marcus, whose expression remained carefully neutral. "Among other indicators, yes, Admiral." "Admiral." Wells closed her folder and leaned back in her chair. "Gentlemen, I've made my decision regarding Commander Vasquez's investigation proposal. Captain Kane, you'll be pleased to know that I'm not authorizing a full security review of senior staff." Elena felt her heart sink. Was Admiral Wells dismissing the investigation to protect Marcus? Or was she being manipulated just as Elena had been? "However," Admiral Wells continued, "I am authorizing a targeted investigation of specific individuals whose activities have raised questions. Commander Vasquez, you'll be working directly with Naval Criminal Investigative Service and FBI counterintelligence to pursue these leads." Marcus's drumming fingers stopped. "Admiral, may I ask what specific activities have raised questions?" "Unusual communication patterns, unexplained financial transactions, and behavioral indicators that suggest possible compromise." Admiral Wells's gray eyes fixed on Marcus with laser intensity. "Captain Kane, effective immediately, your security clearance is suspended pending the outcome of this investigation." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Elena watched Marcus process the information, his face cycling through surprise, confusion, and something that might have been fear. "Admiral," Marcus said carefully, "I respectfully request clarification of the charges against me." "There are no charges, Captain. This is a security investigation, not a criminal proceeding. Your cooperation is expected and required." Elena realized that Admiral Wells was giving Marcus an opportunity to cooperate, to reveal his network and minimize the damage to the fleet. It was the same opportunity Elena might have given him if she'd confronted him directly instead of working with the FBI. "Admiral," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the catastrophic implications of suspended clearance, "I want to be absolutely clear that I have never compromised classified information or violated my oath as a naval officer." "Your denial is noted, Captain. However, the evidence suggests otherwise." Marcus turned to look at Elena, and she saw something in his eyes that made her blood run cold. Not fear or confusion, but calculation. Marcus was evaluating threats and opportunities, deciding how to respond to this unexpected development. "Elena," he said quietly, "did you know about this investigation?" The question was loaded with implications. If Elena said yes, Marcus would know she'd been working against him. If she said no, she would be lying to her commanding officer during an official investigation. "I recommended the security review," Elena said carefully. "Admiral Wells made the decision about how to pursue it." "So you did know." Admiral Wells intervened before Elena could respond. "Captain Kane, Commander Vasquez's role in this investigation is not your concern. Your concern is cooperating fully with the authorities who will be questioning you." Elena checked her watch discreetly. 0955. In 5 minutes, FBI agents would begin arresting Marcus's co-conspirators throughout the base. The network that had operated successfully for 3 years was about to be dismantled completely. Marcus seemed to sense the shift in atmosphere. His posture straightened, and Elena recognized the subtle change that indicated he was shifting from defensive mode to active threat assessment. "Admiral," Marcus said, standing slowly, "I think there's been a misunderstanding. If you'll give me a few minutes to gather some materials from my office, I can provide documentation that will clarify these concerns." Elena felt alarm bells screaming. In her mind, Marcus was asking for time and mobility, exactly what a trapped intelligence operative would need to escape or eliminate threats. "Captain Kane," Admiral Wells said firmly, "you will remain here until NCIS personnel arrive to escort you. Your office is currently being secured as part of the investigation." Marcus's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold and dangerous underneath. Elena's hand moved instinctively toward her service weapon. "I see," Marcus said. "Admiral, I'm curious, when did this investigation begin? When did you first suspect that classified information was being compromised?" Admiral Wells met his gaze. Steadily, "Captain, your questions will be answered during your formal debriefing. For now, I need you to remain seated and wait for NCIS." Marcus looked at Elena again, and this time there was no mistaking the threat in his expression. "Elena, I'm disappointed. I thought we had an understanding about loyalty and trust." "We did," Elena said quietly. "I was loyal to my country. I trusted the evidence. The evidence that you've been collecting how long? Days, weeks, months?" Elena realized that Marcus was trying to determine the scope of the investigation and her role in it. He was still gathering intelligence, still trying to protect his operation, even as it collapsed around him. "Long enough," she said. Marcus nodded slowly, as if confirming something he'd suspected. "I underestimated you, Elena. I thought your moral certainty would make you predictable. I was wrong." Before anyone could react, Marcus's hand moved toward his service weapon. Elena drew her pistol with the speed of someone who'd trained for this moment her entire military career, aiming center mass at the man she'd shared a bed with for 3 years. "Don't," Elena said, her voice deadly calm. "Please don't make me do this." Marcus froze with his hand halfway to his weapon, recognizing the absolute resolve in Elena's voice. Admiral Wells had also drawn her sidearm, positioning herself to maintain a clear field of fire. "Captain Kane," Admiral Wells said, "place your hands on your head and step away from your weapon." For a long moment, the office was silent except for the sound of 3 people breathing. Elena could see Marcus calculating odds, evaluating options, deciding whether to surrender or fight. The decision was made for him when the office door burst open and 4 NCIS agents in tactical gear entered with weapons drawn. "Captain Marcus Kane," the lead agent announced, "you're under arrest for violations of the Espionage Act, conspiracy to commit treason, and murder in the first degree." Murder. Elena felt the word hit her like a physical blow. Marcus hadn't just sold intelligence, he'd killed people to protect his operation. As the NCIS agent secured Marcus's weapon and placed him in restraints, he looked at Elena one final time. "You have no idea what you've done," he said quietly. "No idea what you've set in motion." "I've stopped a traitor," Elena replied. Marcus smiled, the expression cold and bitter. "You've stopped one operation. But Elena, you're still thinking too small. This was never about submarines or intelligence leaks. This was preparation for something much larger." Before Elena could ask what he meant, the NCIS agents were escorting Marcus out of Admiral Wells' office, ending 3 years of lies and beginning what Elena suspected would be a much larger and more dangerous investigation. "Admiral." Wells holstered her weapon and turned to Elena. "Commander, are you all right?" Elena stared at the door where Marcus had disappeared, thinking about his final words. "Admiral, what did he mean about preparation for something larger?" "That's what we're going to find out. Elena, this investigation is just beginning. What we've uncovered today is the tip of an iceberg that could threaten national security in ways we're only starting to understand." Elena's secure phone buzzed with a message from Agent Chen. "Primary target secured. Secondary. Arrests in progress. Stand by for full debrief." Admiral Wells noticed Elena checking her phone. "Commander, I should tell you I've been working with FBI counterintelligence for the past 6 weeks. Your discovery of Captain Kane's activities provided the final evidence we needed to move against his network." Elena stared at the Admiral. "You've known for 6 weeks? We've suspected for months. But suspicion isn't evidence, and we needed proof before we could act. Your courage in coming forward gave us that proof." Elena felt like the ground was shifting beneath her feet. "Admiral, how many people knew Marcus was under investigation?" "Very few." "And Elena, that's going to be critical going forward. Because Captain Kane was right about one thing: this operation was preparation for something larger. We have evidence of similar networks in other fleets, other branches of the military, possibly other allied nations." Elena sank into her chair, overwhelmed by the implications. "How widespread is this? We don't know yet. But Elena, you've done something remarkable today. You've helped us begin to unravel what may be the most sophisticated intelligence operation ever mounted against the United States." Elena thought about Marcus's final words, his suggestion that stopping him had somehow made things worse. "Admiral, what if arresting him was a mistake? What if we've just triggered something we're not prepared for?" Admiral Wells moved to her window, looking out at the harbor where American submarines prepared for missions that might now be compromised before they began. "Then we'll face whatever comes next with the same courage you showed today. Elena, you've proven that there are still people in this Navy who will choose duty over personal loyalty, country over comfort. That gives me hope that we can survive whatever Marcus Kane and his masters have planned for us." Elena's phone buzzed again. "Report to Building C for full operational briefing. Bring all case files." Time to end this completely. As Elena gathered her materials and prepared to leave Admiral Wells' office, She couldn't shake the feeling that Marcus's arrest was not an ending, but a beginning. His network had been operating for years, preparing for something he'd called much larger. Elena was about to discover just how large that something really was. Building C's secure briefing room had been transformed into a command center for what was clearly the largest counterintelligence operation in recent naval history. Elena arrived to find FBI agents, NCIS investigators, and senior naval officers coordinating arrests, evidence processing, and damage assessment across multiple time zones. Agent Chen approached Elena as she entered the controlled chaos. "Commander, thank you for your work this morning." The arrests went smoothly because Captain Kane was neutralized before he could warn his network. Elena surveyed the room, noting tactical displays showing operations across the Pacific Fleet. How many people were arrested? 12 confirmed conspirators so far, with more arrests expected as we process intelligence from seized computers and communication devices. Agent Chen led Elena to a secure workstation. "But Elena, what we've discovered is much larger than we initially suspected." The workstation displayed a network diagram that made Elena's stomach drop. Names, photographs, and connection lines showed a web of conspiracy that extended throughout the Pacific Fleet and into other military branches. "Commander Janet Torres, Strategic Planning," Agent Chen said, pointing to one node in the network. She provided long-term deployment schedules to enable enemy positioning. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Park, Communications. She facilitated secure transmissions between network members and foreign contacts. Elena stared at the faces of colleagues she'd worked with for years. How many others? At least 20 confirmed members across multiple bases and ships. Possibly more. Elena, this wasn't just an intelligence leak. It was a systematic effort to compromise American naval operations throughout the Pacific theater. Elena studied the network diagram more closely, noting connections that extended beyond the immediate. Conspirators. Agent Chen, some of these connections show question marks. Potential additional members? Officers whose activities suggest possible involvement, but who we don't have sufficient evidence to arrest yet. Elena, this is where we need your help. Agent Chen opened another file, revealing financial records and communication logs. Captain Kane received over $14 million over 3 years, but that represents only about 30% of the total payments we've identified. Someone else was receiving the majority of the funds. Someone higher in the command structure, we believe so. Elena, we think Captain Kane was running a cell within a larger network commanded by someone with even greater access to classified information. Elena felt a chill. How much greater access? Someone with the ability to authorize changes to fleet-wide operational procedures. Someone who could redirect entire submarine groups without arousing suspicion. Someone who could modify intelligence assessments before they reach decision-makers. Elena thought about the implications. Admiral-level access. That's our assessment. Elena, we believe there's a flag officer who's been coordinating this operation from the highest levels of Pacific Fleet Command. Elena sank into a chair, overwhelmed by the scope of the betrayal. Do you have suspects? Agent Chen hesitated, then opened another file. Elena, I need to ask you some difficult questions about Admiral Wells. Elena's world shifted. Admiral Wells? She just helped arrest Marcus. She's been investigating this network, or she's been managing it. Elena, Admiral Wells had access to every piece of information that was compromised. She knew about your investigation before you made it official. She could have warned Captain Kane at any time but chose not to. Elena thought about the morning's meeting, Admiral Wells' questions, her knowledge of Marcus's midnight activities. She was protecting the investigation. She wanted to gather evidence before acting. That's one interpretation. Another is that she was managing the network's response to your discovery. Elena, think about it. Admiral Wells had the power to shut down your investigation immediately. Instead, she let it proceed while ensuring she controlled how it developed. Elena felt sick. If Admiral Wells was part of the network, then Elena had been manipulated from the very beginning. Her investigation, her relationship with Marcus, even her decision to work with the FBI, all of it could have been orchestrated by someone she'd trusted completely. Agent Chen, if Admiral Wells is involved, then she knows everything about this operation. She knows you've arrested the network members. She knows I've been working with you. Which is why we need to move quickly. Elena, we're preparing to arrest Admiral Wells, but we need you to help us gather final evidence. Elena stared at Agent Chen. What kind of evidence? Admiral Wells has called a senior staff meeting for 1500 hours to discuss the morning's arrests and their implications for fleet security. We need you to attend that meeting wearing a recording device. Elena felt like she was falling into an abyss. First Marcus, now Admiral Wells. How many people she'd trusted were part of this conspiracy? Agent Chen, if I'm wrong about Admiral Wells, if she's innocent and I help you build a case against her, then we'll discover that during our investigation and clear her name. But Elena, if she's guilty and we don't act, she have time to warn higher-level contacts, destroy evidence, and possibly eliminate witnesses. Elena thought about Lieutenant Commander Peterson, murdered because he discovered irregularities in submarine schedules. About her brother Miguel, targeted for capture because his submarine's position had been sold to enemy intelligence. About the 24 officers who'd been arrested that morning, their careers and lives destroyed by their betrayal of everything they'd sworn to protect. What do you need me to do? Agent Chen opened a briefcase containing sophisticated recording equipment. We need you to get Admiral Wells to discuss the network's operations, her knowledge of the conspiracy, and her plans for managing the investigation's fallout. Elena examined the recording device, a small transmitter designed to look like a standard military communication device. How do I get her to incriminate herself? Express concern about the scope of the investigation. Ask if she thinks there might be additional compromised personnel. Watch for her reactions when you mention specific names or operations. Elena clipped the device to her uniform, feeling its weight like a stone in her chest. Agent Chen, what if I'm wrong? What if Admiral Wells really is innocent and I'm about to destroy the career of someone who's been trying to protect the fleet? Then, you'll have learned that sometimes doing the right thing requires taking terrible risks. Elena, you've already proven you have the courage to investigate people you care about. Now we need you to do it one more time. Elena checked her watch. 14:30. She had 30 minutes to prepare for what might be the most important conversation of her military career. Agent Chen, after this meeting, after we know the truth about Admiral Wells, what happens to me? How do I continue serving in a Navy where I've had to investigate my commanding officer and the woman I loved? Agent Chen's expression softened. Elena, heroes rarely get happy endings in intelligence work. But you've saved lives, protected national security, and upheld your oath as a naval officer. That has to be enough. Elena nodded, understanding that her military career would never be the same regardless of how this investigation concluded. She'd crossed lines that couldn't be uncrossed, made enemies who wouldn't forgive, and learned truths that would change how she saw every colleague and superior for the rest of her service. I'll do it, Elena said. But Agent Chen, if something happens to me in that meeting, nothing will happen. We'll have agents positioned throughout the building, and the meeting is being monitored in real time. Elena, you're not alone in this. Elena gathered her materials and prepared to attend what might be Admiral Wells' final senior staff meeting. She was about to discover whether the woman she'd respected and trusted for 3 years was a dedicated public servant or the most dangerous traitor in American naval history. As she walked toward the briefing room where Admiral Wells waited, Elena realized that Marcus had been right about one thing. She really had no idea what she'd set in motion. The network she'd uncovered was larger, more sophisticated, and more dangerous than anyone had imagined, and Elena was about to discover that the worst betrayals came from the people you trusted most completely. Elena entered Admiral Wells' conference room at exactly 1500 hours to find a gathering that felt more like a wake than a staff meeting. The morning's arrests had left gaps in the senior staff that would take months to fill, and the remaining officers looked shell-shocked by the revelation that their colleagues had been foreign agents. Admiral Wells sat at the head of the table, her expression grave but composed. Elena took her usual seat, acutely aware of the recording device hidden in her uniform and the weight of suspicion that now surrounded every interaction. "Ladies and gentlemen," Admiral Wells began, "this morning's arrests represent the most serious security breach in Pacific Fleet history. We're here to assess the damage and plan our response." Lieutenant Commander Kim, one of the few senior officers not under investigation, spoke first. "Admiral, how do we know the network has been completely dismantled? If Captain Kane was recruiting assets for 3 years, there could be others we haven't identified." Elena watched Admiral Wells carefully, looking for any sign that she was concerned about undiscovered conspirators or that she was one herself. "That's an excellent question, David," Admiral Wells replied. "The FBI and NCIS are conducting comprehensive reviews of all personnel who had access to compromised information. We should assume there are additional security risks until proven otherwise." Commander Harrison from Intelligence Support raised another concern. "Admiral, the operational implications are staggering. Every submarine patrol for the past 3 years may have been compromised. How do we assess which missions were affected?" Admiral Wells opened a classified folder. "We're conducting full damage assessment, but preliminary analysis suggests that 12 submarine operations were directly compromised, with enemy forces positioned to exploit the intelligence they received." Elena leaned forward. "Admiral, we know how the network coordinated their activities. The operational security challenges would have been enormous." Admiral Wells met Elena's eyes across the table. "Commander Vasquez, that's an insightful question. Coordinating a network of this size would require someone with access to multiple communication systems and the authority to move assets without arousing suspicion." "Someone in a senior leadership position," Elena said carefully. "Exactly. The FBI believes the network was commanded by someone with flag officer-level access to classified information." Elena felt her pulse quicken. Admiral Wells was discussing the investigation into flag officer involvement with remarkable composure for someone who might be the primary suspect. "Lieutenant Commander." Kim looked confused. "Admiral, are you saying there might be compromised admirals?" "I'm saying the investigation is ongoing, and we should prepare for additional revelations that could be even more damaging than this morning's arrests." Elena decided to probe deeper. "Admiral, hypothetically, if a flag officer were involved, how would we detect their activities?" "The normal oversight mechanisms wouldn't apply to someone at that level." Admiral Wells was quiet for a moment, and Elena caught a flicker of something in her expression. Calculation, perhaps, or evaluation. "Hypothetically, Commander, you'd look for patterns in decision-making that consistently benefited enemy interests. You'd analyze communication patterns for unauthorized contacts. And you'd follow the money. Large-scale espionage operations require significant financial resources." Elena thought about Agent Chen's assertion that Admiral Wells had received the majority of the network's payments. "Admiral, the financial aspect is interesting. Captain Kane received $14 million over 3 years. That suggests the total operation involved much larger sums." "Much larger," Admiral Wells agreed. "Elena, what's your assessment of the network's ultimate objectives? Was this purely intelligence gathering, or were they preparing for something more significant?" Elena felt like she was being tested, evaluated for her understanding of the conspiracy's true scope. Based on the pattern of compromised operations, I'd say they were mapping our entire Pacific submarine capability in preparation for a potential conflict. Conflict with whom? Elena met Admiral Wells' gray eyes directly. Russia and China. The compromised operations all occurred in areas where those nations have increasing strategic interests. Admiral Wells nodded slowly. And if you were planning such a conflict, what would be your next steps after successfully mapping enemy submarine capabilities? Elena realized she was being drawn into a discussion of military strategy that could reveal Admiral Wells' true loyalties. You'd want to neutralize the submarine threat during the opening hours of any conflict. Disable or destroy as many vessels as possible before they could respond effectively. How would you accomplish that? Elena thought about her brother's near capture, the Russian submarines positioned to intercept American vessels during their communication blackouts, coordinated attacks during routine operations, use the intelligence gathered to position enemy forces for maximum effectiveness. Admiral Wells leaned back in her chair. Elena, you've just described exactly what this network was preparing to facilitate. A decapitation strike against American submarine forces that would have been devastatingly effective. Lieutenant Commander Kim looked horrified. Are you saying we were on the verge of losing our entire Pacific submarine fleet? I'm saying that's what would have happened if Commander Vasquez hadn't discovered Captain Kane's activities when she did, Admiral Wells replied. Elena, your investigation may have prevented the most successful surprise attack in naval history. Elena studied Admiral Wells' face, searching for any sign of deception or manipulation. The Admiral seemed genuinely grateful for Elena's work, genuinely concerned about the security implications, genuinely committed to understanding the network's objectives. But Agent Chen's words echoed in Elena's mind. Admiral Wells had access to every piece of compromised information. She could have warned Marcus at any time. She could have shut down Elena's investigation before it began. Elena decided to take a more direct approach. Admiral, there's something that's been troubling me. How did you know to have Captain Kane under surveillance? The photographs you showed this morning suggested you'd been watching him for some time. Admiral Wells' expression didn't change, but Elena caught a subtle shift in her posture. Elena, I've been concerned about security irregularities for months. Captain Kane's behavior patterns suggested possible compromise. What behavior patterns? Unusual work hours. Access to systems outside his normal responsibilities. Financial improvements that didn't match his official income. Elena felt a chill. Admiral, how did you know about his financial improvements? Admiral Wells was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was carefully controlled. Elena, I think it's time we discussed your role in the FBI investigation. The conference room went silent. Elena realized that Admiral Wells knew about her cooperation with Agent Chen, her secret meetings, her role in gathering evidence against Marcus. Admiral, you've been working with FBI counterintelligence for how long? 3 days? A week? Elena met Admiral Wells' gaze steadily. Since I discovered evidence of Captain Kane's activities, and you didn't think to inform your commanding officer about your concerns before going to federal law enforcement. Elena felt the trap closing around her. Admiral, I wasn't sure who could be trusted. The network's reach appeared extensive. Admiral Wells nodded slowly. Including me. Elena, you suspected that I might be part of Captain Kane's conspiracy. It wasn't a question, and Elena realized there was no point in denying it. The possibility had to be considered. Of course it did. Elena, I want you to know that I don't blame you for your suspicion. In fact, I respect you for it. Elena felt confused. Admiral? Admiral Wells stood and moved to the window overlooking the harbor. Elena, I've been working with FBI counterintelligence for 8 months. Long before you discovered Captain Kane's activities, we suspected there was a network operating within the Pacific Fleet. Elena's mind reeled. You've been investigating this for 8 months? We've been building a case, gathering evidence, trying to identify the full scope of the conspiracy before making arrests. Your discovery of Captain Kane's encrypted files provided the final evidence we needed. Lieutenant. Commander Kim looked between Elena and Admiral Wells. I'm confused. Are you both working with the FBI? Admiral Wells turned back to the table. David, for the past 8 months, I've been the FBI's primary source inside Pacific Fleet Command. My investigation identified Captain Kane and his network as foreign assets. Elena felt like the world was spinning. Admiral, if you knew Marcus was compromised, why didn't you arrest him months ago? Because we needed to understand the full network before acting. Arresting Captain Kane prematurely would have warned other conspirators and compromised our investigation. Elena thought about the 3 months she'd spent living with Marcus, sleeping beside him, trusting him while Admiral Wells had known he was a traitor. Admiral, I was at risk. He could have killed me if he'd suspected I was investigating him. Admiral. Wells' expression softened. Elena, you were never at risk because we were monitoring Captain Kane's activities continuously. If he'd made any move against you, we would have intervened immediately. Elena stared at Admiral Wells, trying to process the revelation that her investigation had been part of a larger operation from the beginning. So when I came to you with evidence of submarine equipment failures, I already knew about the failures. But I needed to see if you would reach the same conclusions independently, and I needed to evaluate your suitability for a deeper role in the investigation. Elena felt manipulated, used. A deeper role? Admiral Wells returned to her seat. Elena, this investigation isn't over. We've dismantled Captain Kane's network, but there are indications of similar operations in other fleets, other branches of the military. The FBI wants you to help identify and investigate those networks. Elena looked around the conference room at her remaining colleagues, wondering how many of them were also FBI assets, how many layers of deception surrounded every conversation and interaction. Admiral, I need to understand something. Agent Chen told me you might be part of the conspiracy. Was that part of the investigation too? Admiral Wells smiled grimly. Elena, Agent Chen was testing your resolve. Could you investigate someone you respected and trusted if the evidence suggested they were compromised? Your willingness to wear a recording device to gather evidence against me proved that you have the moral courage necessary for the work ahead. Elena felt the recording device in her uniform, realizing that Admiral Wells knew about it, that this entire conversation had been orchestrated to test her commitment to the investigation. So this meeting is your final examination, Elena. You've proven you can investigate a lover, a mentor, and a commanding officer when duty requires it. Now we need to know if you're willing to take on an even more dangerous assignment. Elena met Admiral Wells' eyes, understanding that her life was about to change in ways she couldn't imagine. What assignment? Elena, we believe similar networks are operating in Atlantic Fleet, European Command, and possibly Pacific Air Forces. We need someone with your analytical skills and proven courage to help us identify and neutralize those threats. Elena thought about the past week, the betrayal, the investigation, the arrests, the revelation that nothing was what it seemed. She thought about Marcus sitting in a federal detention facility, and about the 24 officers whose careers had ended that morning. Admiral, if I accept this assignment, what happens to my normal duties? My career progression? My life? Admiral Wells' expression grew serious. Elena, heroes rarely get normal lives, but you'll be protecting your country from threats that most people will never know existed. Is that enough? Elena looked around the conference room one more time, at the faces of colleagues who had survived the morning's purge, at the empty chairs where traitors had once sat, At the windows overlooking a harbor were submarines prepared for missions that might now be safe because of her investigation. "It's enough," Elena said. Admiral Wells nodded. "Then welcome to the real war, Commander Vasquez. I hope you're ready for what comes next." Elena wasn't sure anyone could be ready for what came next, but she was committed to finding out. 3 weeks after the Pacific Fleet arrests, Elena found herself in a windowless conference room in the Pentagon, surrounded by intelligence officers from every branch of the military and alphabet agencies she'd only heard about in classified briefings. The scope of Operation Blackwater, as the conspiracy had been codenamed, was larger than anyone had initially comprehended. Admiral Wells sat at the head of a table that bore the weight of America's most sensitive secrets. Elena had traveled with the Admiral to Washington, D.C. for what was being called the most comprehensive counterintelligence briefing in decades. "Ladies and gentlemen," Admiral Wells began, "what we initially identified as a Pacific Fleet security breach has revealed a systematic effort to compromise American military operations on a global scale." Elena studied the faces around the table. Generals, admirals, directors of agencies whose existence was barely acknowledged publicly. Each of them had discovered similar patterns of betrayal within their commands. General Patricia Morrison from Air Force Intelligence spoke first. "Admiral Wells, our investigation has identified 12 compromised officers across 3 different air bases. The pattern matches what you discovered in the Pacific Fleet." Colonel James Rodriguez from Army Counterintelligence nodded grimly. "Same here. 15 officers, ranging from captains to full colonels, all receiving payments from the same cryptocurrency network that funded Kane's operation." Elena felt the scope of the conspiracy settling over her like a weight. "How widespread is this network?" CIA Deputy Director Sarah Hamilton opened a classified folder. "Commander Vasquez, based on the intelligence gathered from Captain Kane's arrest and subsequent investigations, we estimate the network includes at least 200 compromised personnel across all branches of the military and several allied nations. 200 traitors." Elena struggled to comprehend the operational security implications. The financial trail leads back to a coordinated effort funded by Russian and Chinese intelligence services working in unprecedented cooperation. Deputy Director Hamilton continued. "This wasn't separate operations. It was a joint effort to systematically compromise American military capability." Admiral Wells activated a secure display showing a global map with network connections spanning 6 continents. "The operation has been active for at least 7 years, recruiting assets, gathering intelligence, and positioning personnel for coordinated action." Elena studied the map, noting connection points in Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. "Admiral, this level of coordination suggests they were preparing for a specific operation." "What was the target?" General Morrison answered. "Commander, they were preparing to neutralize American military response capability during the opening hours of a coordinated attack. Disable communication systems, compromise command structures, eliminate key personnel." Elena felt cold. "A decapitation strike." "Exactly. If successful, it would have left American forces leaderless, confused, and unable to coordinate effective resistance for critical hours or days." Colonel Rodriguez leaned forward. "Commander Vasquez, your investigation of Captain Kane prevented the execution of this operation. The network was preparing to activate when you uncovered their activities." Elena thought about Marcus's final words in Admiral Wells' office. "You have no idea what you've set in motion." He'd been referring to the disruption of a planned attack that could have crippled American military capacity globally. "What's the current threat assessment?" Elena asked. Deputy Director Hamilton's expression grew grim. "High and escalating. The network's exposure has forced our adversaries to accelerate their timeline. Intelligence suggests they're preparing alternative approaches to achieve the same objectives." Admiral Wells addressed Elena directly. Elena, this is why we need you. Your analytical skills and proven ability to identify patterns in complex intelligence could be critical to preventing alternative attacks. Elena looked around the table at faces that represented the highest levels of American national security. What exactly are you asking me to do? We're asking you to help us hunt down the remaining network members and identify their new operations before they can execute alternative plans, Admiral Wells said. Elena, you'll be working with a joint task force that has unprecedented access and authority. Elena thought about her brother Miguel, safe aboard the USS Hampton because her investigation had prevented his capture. About the 200 American military personnel who had betrayed their oaths for foreign money. About the coordinated attack that had been prevented by her discovery of Marcus's encrypted files. I accept, Elena said. Deputy Director Hamilton smiled. For the first time during the briefing. Commander, there's something else you should know. Captain Kane has agreed to cooperate with the captain's betrayal.